always thought my parents loved my brother more than me, not in the obvious way. They never said it out loud. They never ignored me. They paid for my education, came to my graduation, and called me every week. But some things don't need to be spoken. Some things are written. And in my family, everything was written. My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I watched my younger brother, Ryan, receive opportunities that somehow never came my way. When Ryan wanted a new car at 18, my parents bought one. When I needed help with college expenses, I was told it would build character if I handled things myself. When Ryan dropped out of his first university, my parents paid for a second one. When I struggled to make rent after graduation, they reminded me that adulthood was about responsibility. I learned early not to complain. I built my own life. I worked hard, rented a small apartment, and eventually became financially stable without depending on anyone. The distance between me and my parents wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, polite, comfortable enough to look normal from the outside. Then my father passed away unexpectedly. Everything changed after that. A few weeks after the funeral, my mother invited Ryan and me to her house. She wanted to discuss the will. I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, I wasn't expecting anything. The house had always been Ryan's future inheritance. Everyone knew it. But when the lawyer began reading the documents, even I was surprised. My parents had left Ryan the family home. They had also left him a vacation property I didn't even know they still owned. Most of the investment accounts were assigned to him as well. I received a smaller cash amount, enough to be considered fair, not enough to be considered equal. I sat there quietly. The lawyer continued speaking. Then he paused. "I should also note," he said, adjusting his glasses, "that Ryan is listed as the primary beneficiary on a separate trust established several years ago." Room became silent. Even Ryan looked confused. "A separate trust?" he asked. The lawyer nodded. My mother looked uncomfortable. Apparently, years earlier, my parents had created an additional inheritance fund. And once again, Ryan had been named the main beneficiary. It felt unreal. My brother wasn't just in the will. He was in the inheritance plan twice. I remember staring at the table while everyone avoided eye contact. At that moment, something inside me finally broke. Not because of the money, because of the confirmation. All those years of wondering were over. The answer was right there, written on paper. Ryan got everything. Twice. After the meeting, I drove home in silence. I told myself to move on. The story was over, or at least I thought it was. 3 months later, my grandfather's old farmhouse was scheduled to be sold. Grandpa had passed away years earlier. The property had been sitting untouched ever since. My mother asked if I wanted any keepsakes before the sale. I agreed to spend a weekend helping sort through old boxes. The farmhouse looked exactly as I remembered. Dusty shelves, wooden floors, faded family photographs. It felt like time had stopped there. While cleaning the attic, I discovered an old metal trunk hidden beneath a stack of blankets. Inside were photographs, letters, receipts, and dozens of journals. Most belonged to my grandfather. I almost ignored them, then I noticed one journal with a folded note tucked inside. The note had my name written on it. My hands started shaking. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably Grandpa's. "Emily, if you're reading this, then perhaps the truth finally matters." I read the sentence 3 times. Then I opened the journal. What I found changed everything. Grandpa had documented nearly every major event in our family over 20 years. Birthdays, financial struggles, arguments, secrets. And one secret appeared again and again. Ryan. At first, I didn't understand. The entries were vague. But as I continued reading, a picture slowly formed. Years before I was born, my parents had experienced severe financial problems. My grandfather had stepped in repeatedly, lending them large amounts of money. According to the journal, he only agreed under one condition. The assets he helped create would eventually be divided equally between future children. Equal, not based on favorites, not based on personal preference, equal. Grandpa documented every loan, every agreement, every promise. There were dates, signatures, witnesses, copies of financial records. The evidence was astonishing. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. Near the end of the journal, Grandpa described a conversation with my father, one that happened shortly before Grandpa died. The entry read, "Your father admitted he planned to leave most assets to Ryan. I reminded him of our agreement. He promised he would correct everything." I felt my stomach drop. Correct everything. Then why hadn't he? Why was Ryan listed everywhere? Why was I nearly excluded? The answer appeared a few pages later. Another entry, another date, another revelation. Grandpa wrote that my father had intended to update the estate documents after reviewing all family assets. But before those changes were completed, he became seriously ill. The process was delayed, then forgotten. The journal even listed specific assets Grandpa believed should be divided equally, including the vacation property, including investment accounts, including portions of the trust. Suddenly, the entire situation looked very different. This wasn't necessarily favoritism. It was unfinished business. I spent 2 days reading every page. By Sunday evening, I had scanned everything, every journal, every document, every receipt. Then I contacted an attorney. The lawyer reviewed the material carefully. His reaction surprised me. "These journals alone aren't enough," he said. "But combined with the supporting records, they could become very important." For the first time, I felt hopeful, not greedy, not angry, just hopeful. The next step was difficult. I had to tell Ryan. We met at a coffee shop. I expected an argument. Instead, he listened quietly. Then he said something I never expected. "I didn't ask for any of this." I stared at him. He continued. "Emily, I didn't even know about the trust until the lawyer mentioned it. If Grandpa left evidence that things were supposed to be different, we should look at it honestly." That conversation changed our relationship forever. For years, I had blamed Ryan, but maybe Ryan wasn't the problem. Maybe he had simply been standing where the spotlight happened to shine. Over the following months, lawyers reviewed records, property histories, trust documents, and Grandpa's journals. The process moved slowly, painfully slowly. But eventually, a conclusion emerged. Several assets had indeed originated from agreements connected to Grandpa's financial support. Those agreements had never been fully reflected in the final estate structure. The journals didn't rewrite the will, but they helped establish intent. And intent mattered. After negotiations, a settlement was reached. The vacation property was sold. Certain investment accounts were redistributed. Trust assets were adjusted. The final result wasn't perfectly equal, but it was fair. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not because of money, because the truth had finally surfaced. Months later, Ryan and I returned to Grandpa's farmhouse one last time before it changed ownership. We stood on the porch as the sun disappeared behind the fields. Neither of us spoke for a while, then Ryan smiled. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "We spent years believing different versions of the same story." I nodded because he was right. I believed my parents had chosen him over me. Ryan believed our parents simply trusted him more. Neither of us knew the full truth. The truth had been sitting in a dusty attic the entire time, waiting, hidden inside a journal. As we prepared to leave, I thought about Grandpa, about the note he had left. "If you're reading this, then perhaps the truth finally matters." For years, inheritance had divided our family. But in the end, it wasn't the money that brought peace. It was the truth. And sometimes, the most valuable thing you inherit isn't property, land, or a bank account. Sometimes it's the evidence that finally tells the real story. Thank you for listening to Emily Calm Stories. If this story kept you engaged until the end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'll be back with another unforgettable family mystery soon.